There is an emotional state of being, a sort of pale blue feeling, an imagined sense of spatial awareness when I look at the Voyager 1's photograph of Earth. I imagine the humans sent into space in the 1960s who look back at our Earth and saw a pale blue dot. What was it like to imagine from space that they lived there? Could they imagine locating themselves within this speck of blue? And what is that pale blue dot feeling? The feeling of expanse and belonging that we all, to some degree, consistently search for. The feeling of being small but deeply interconnected in the vast fabric of this universe. I think the secret in that blue feeling is in the collective. As an artist, I'm looking for the webs of connections not only between us and the cosmos at large, but us and nature, us and each other, other humans. In the late spring of 2020, when I was finishing my MFA in sculpture and on track for our thesis show, I found myself for the first time in the Adirondack Mountains. Shortly after New York State's lockdown, driving up on highways 5 hours, possibly seeing 10 other cars on an otherwise empty road my entire trip. It was kind of eerie. And as I sought to, in my own isolation and unknown futures, immerse myself outside, I found myself hiking a lot in the mountains, feeling an overwhelming drive to get to the summit, to see my surroundings from a totally new perspective, a bird's eye view. On the summit, I breathed into the landscape, able to see so far into the blue haze of those distant mountains, nestled around lakes and rivers that are very much alive. I am part of something larger than myself. Where do we share unity? Where do we share alignment? How are we connecting to each other? From root systems of trees that use mycelial networks to send nutrients to its sick neighbor, coral reefs with many individual organisms gathered in symbiotic colonies. From our synapses and neural networks to the beautiful strings of the quantum realm, there's this repeating rhizomatic pattern in the way that the universe is laid. I have always seen sculpture as an aperture for perception, how artists can really create these spaces that emote and transmit certain feelings and ideas. Sculpture can transport us. It's very tactile, phenomenological. It's a fully embodied way of being in the world and creating imaginative relationships. And in this time of isolation and unknown futures, I needed to be brought into a different kind of world, a world of webs and interconnectivity. And on one of those summit moments, standing in the high peaks, meditating on that amazing blue of the atmosphere in the distance, I felt my next sculpture forming. At the Adirondack History Museum in Elizabethtown, the following summer of 2021, I began to build this sculptural encounter. It was a nod to the blue feeling I had on those long summit moments, looking into the atmosphere in the direction of my then temporary home. I named the artwork, "Blue is the atmospheric refraction I see you through." Its form is a sculptural lens for a type of collective framework. The sculpture is designed to be a participation between two people. Incised in the dome are two twin staircases that gently curve into a recess and meet at its apex. As you walk up the stairs, you become fully enveloped in the blue walls, shifting perspectives as you continue up, in, and then out of the blue walls' embrace. On the final step, you rest your hands on the dome's curvature and directly face another viewer. The dome can be a mountain. It can be a planet. For me, the shape holds a lot of momentum that's pushing two particles together like currents, spheres shaped by gravity in our cosmic soup. I was also thinking about stellar observatories, like my favorite McDonald Observatory in West Texas, my home state. It was here that I first peered through a telescope to see the rings of Saturn with my own eyes. I was also thinking about dome-shaped listening towers like Teufelsberg outside Berlin, where I lived for some years before returning to graduate school. To me, mountains were also like a structure that you climb up and out into a different perspective. At the time, I was reading and reflecting on distance, subjectivity, longing. Maggie Nelson's novel, Bluets, was often in my hiking backpack. Two participants walking up the sculpture steps have similar yet distinct experiences of climbing twin staircases that are recessed into this larger dome. Twin staircases are key here to the architecture of this sculpture. They require mirrored movements, activating what's called mirror neurons. While I was in graduate school, I was interested in following the overlapping threads that merge the art and science practices. Artists and scientists have similar ways of being in the lab or the studio by creating hypotheses, testing, experimenting with matter. In the sculptural realm, we're looking at philosophies of phenomenology, body movement in space, and how spaces impact our felt senses and really shift us. I wanted to learn more, but from a neuroscience perspective. So I found myself in a cognitive science lab meeting during graduate school. I was intrigued by the idea that there are a subset of neurons that correlate to human empathy and drive our connection to each other. In short, mirror neurons are triggered by shared actions or movements between people. So take this image of Studio 54, for example, and imagine yourself on a crowded dance floor, getting lost in movement and mirroring other people's disco moves. Or dancing with a partner. Your actions are not the same, but complementary, moving in tandem and combining to something greater. In a recent 2023 study titled Enhanced Neural Synchrony Associated with Long-Term Ballroom Dance Training, dancing partners become increasingly similar the longer they've danced together. When we move with someone, especially someone we've moved with for a long enough time, our brains become more and more unified. So, in the case of my blue sculpture, two people are executing the same motor acts, moving around, into, and up the curved stairwell. They are then faced with each other, standing at a short distance and elevated from the earth. Somatically, this becomes a space of encounter, a terrain to see and be seen by others, to recognize and be recognized. Another question I ask myself as a sculptor is how colors and design can take the stage for our collective experiences. After holding so many color swatches from the paint sections of hardware stores and failing to find the right shade of blue, I made my own from natural pigments and binders with an early recipe similar to the first paint made by humans. This particular shade I call atmospheric blue. It's somewhere between a blue-gray and a periwinkle. The color I wanted to capture was that blue, drawn from our expansive atmosphere, inspired by staring at the blue haze of those distant mountains. Now, atmospheric blue is a tricky one to capture because it hovers over the objects in the landscape and is metaphysically questioned to be real. Is it the atmosphere, the ozone? How is it that I have learned so many times why the sky is blue but can never seem to remember the details? Blue is more of a feeling. Blue is the haze of those far-away peaks, their gradient mist inviting a deep sense of longing and belonging. Blue is the atmospheric refraction I see you through. As I continue to build the sculpture, nail by nail, I was brought back to that blue feeling a part of the greater sphere. Everything that we see as large is made up of the small and even smaller. Relational ways of being across ecosystems. And when we look at each other, perhaps it is also through this blue lens. Our individual viewpoints and past experiences color our perception of each other. Summits can be craved. Climbing higher to get that view. Scaling steps, ascending out of our bodies to experience the world from many views, and to locate ourselves within. Such sight gives us distance to read our connective tissue. What are the synapses that bind us? The micro of the individual that weaves into the macro of the collective whole. That blue feeling. Blue is the glimmering shape I see below when I am on the summit, the lake at the end of the road, now with a strange finger of inferred trees jutting out into the shape's belly. From these heights, texture translates to color washes, and we are but small filaments, interconnected in this larger dome. Thank you.